So continuing on with marketing, our next topic are competitors. And so once you hit that market, who is it you're going to go up against? And so we're going to talk about the nature of competition, mapping competitors, making assessments, strategy elements, and how do we formulate strategy against the competition. So competitors are enterprises that are vying with you over the same customer values. And so how are you going to gain benefit? Who touches the customer? Meaning, who is the customer listening to? How do we interpret them and figure out how to basically come up with a way that we can look at customers and classify them? And how am I going to persevere? Are you more interested in your obstacles than the competition itself? Is competition a good or a bad thing? Well, on one hand, it's a good thing. Why? Because it shows that there's a market there. It's a bad thing because naturally your competition wants to put you out of business. Competition is taken from the viewpoint of the customer. It takes place at different levels, and you have to forecast basically where do you think they're going. So what it's asking is what is not its competition? And so orange juice, tea, and coffee are things that you drink in the morning. So so what competition is about is what is an alternative to what I'm currently using. And so 5-hour energy drink isn't normally associated with AM drinks. So that's not its competition. In terms of competition, you look at what the product is. What marketing knobs can you turn? Meaning the 4 Ps. What strategy and tactics am I going to make in response to them? And how do I do branding? What branding actually is when you think about a product, what's the first thing that pops in your mind when you think about it? And also context in the world. To know your competition, you have to understand your customer. Imagine who would buy your product. Put yourself in their shoes. Remember descriptors, bases, and behaviors. Who are they? What are they using my product for? And why? Good products have a soul, which means good products touch other values than just the product itself. It connects with buyers on more than one level. This is the age of mass customization. How do you stand out? How memorable are you? Are people going to talk about you? And there's a bottom line. How profitable are you? Now, in terms of mapping out competition, you could do it by virtual maps. Basically, pick 2 variables that you think drives how your customers actually pick something. And so I'm opening a chain of burger joints that allows cell phone ordering, and your order will be waiting for you hot. As it turns out, McDonald's picked this up. And so it's called Burger Dial. So it'll be the fastest and potentially the cheapest. So in terms of competition to McDonald's, your major competitor is somebody who's like you, Burger King. Your minor competitor, and I have no idea why it's doing this, your minor competitor would be like Five and Diner, meaning they serve hamburgers, but you normally wouldn't equate the two. And a potential competitor would be Burger Dial. So you map out the competitive profile, and then in order to write a profile, you would look at this. What is their strategy? What is their capability? And what are their goals? How do they think? Who are they? And where are they going? And so in terms of competitive assessment, look at their value chain, and then mine for information. Annual reports, SEC filings. Annual reports are hilarious because they have to report certain things, but they tend to bury it within the report itself. You can't go up against an entrenched competitor if all you're going to do is compete on one dimension. And 2 of the biggest assumptions people make is people are like us and my way is the best. And that gets you into trouble. Some common mistakes: we're the best performer, there's no competition, you get overly emotional about things, you don't have a strategy, and do you have urgency in what you're doing? Remember, the insurgents got slaughtered. You can't underestimate what well-entrenched competitors have, because they have something you don't, and it's called cash. So if they want to compete against you, they could just go buy another company. And so you have to think hard about what it is that you're providing. Now, it's not, their big advantages is they were you once, except successful. They also have cash. They have infrastructure, meaning supply chains and R&D. They already know the customers, so they have relationships. They have cash. They have contacts, meaning if they want to learn about you, they will find out about you. From anyone from law firms to equipment vendors or whatever, everybody talks about each other. They can lower barriers, but that works both ways. By the way, did I mention they have cash? In approaching a beach, you have one of two choices when you think about entering a market. Stealth, quiet, don't even have a website. Wait until you're ready. Or, especially if you have a digital product, you want to win hearts and minds early. So you want to get buzz about you. You want press. The pro is nobody saw you coming. And the con is nobody saw you coming. There's no right or wrong answer, but a lot depends on what is your product like. George Geis was my digital strategy instructor, and he made a very interesting point, and that's that startups can hang around for a long time. At some point, you have to make up your mind if you want to be a real company. Where am I going to fight? And this is when you establish your beachhead. And either you're going to make it or not make it. So in terms of publicity, part of it could be like spilling out rose petals along the way, or you signal to the competition you're coming and they'll just bomb you from miles away. And who does this? Applied Materials in Silicon Valley is called the evil empire. Why? Because they'll sue people. If they have any idea you're coming, they'll sue you. And a lot of these lawsuits are just frivolous, and they know that. But you don't have the money to keep up with that. And Intel actually does the same thing. But it's not all bad. Leadership. A lot of these companies have bad leadership. You don't, because you're a founder. How good is their distribution? Maybe you can close the gap with people. What is your cash reserve? What about brand? You know, a lot of companies say we have a brand, but like Motorola, what the hell did Motorola mean? And also, they have blinders on. They don't see you coming. Lock out and lock in. I tend to be repetitious about this, but I can't stress enough how important it is because a lot of startups don't think about it. Lockout techniques. For example, contracts work both ways. They could lock you in and lock out competition. Patents. Scale. When I talked about Walmart. Design. Intel is not only the number one microprocessor company in the world, they're the number one motherboard company in the world. What did they do to AMD? They switched the pin out on them, and all of a sudden their chips became uncompatible. Entry costs. Maybe you make it too expensive for people to get into the market. So an example is inkjet printer heads. Now, inkjet printer heads, what they do is every head is, they use pick and place machines. And so you got like 1,000 heads on a strip. Well, this company found out that they could use large silicon wafers and just make one big integrated strip so you don't have to do all this pick and placing. They tried to sell their product to HP, the number one inkjet printer company in the world at that time, and HP said no. And they said no because we just spent $500 million on pick and place machines. We haven't even amortized this debt yet, so no, we're not interested. Medtronic, as you could see, they have limited number of products they could sell because of the disease states. And so all of a sudden, disrupting the market doesn't buy you anything. What are lock-in techniques? Again, contracts, loyalty programs, switching costs. Like, why does all software look like a Microsoft menu. And it's because it became the de facto standard. To make it easier and obvious how people use things, their menus just look like Microsoft. And so education is a very big deal about switching things because you're already comfortable with something else. Why do you want to switch to something else? There's also social lock-in. For example, when Verizon did friends and family discounts, that's how we got onto Verizon because my daughter was on there already. And so it was hard for us to switch. Or maybe you have emotional attachment. Like my daughter loves everything Apple. And so she'll overpay for anything Apple just because she loves it. In terms of entry, static markets, meaning ones that aren't changing, are static for a reason, meaning there's not a lot of growth going on. Industries changing have more opportunity, but on the other hand, with so much volatility, it's also a lot harder. The one thing to keep in mind is digital technology can always help you disrupt the market, and it can reinvigorate the market. Has the customer become numb to a value, like video game violence? In terms of cognitive capacity, what's too much information? What's enough? Do people take for granted their products? Do they get bored? If you get someone's attention, what are you going to do with it? And so once again, what we see is the chasm. Values change over time. Your early adopters are passionate about your project. They have the greatest need, but their number can be limited. And so you have to prepare how you're going to cross that chasm. Here are the description of the chasm. You've seen this before. And here are some examples that actually do prove that there's a chasm. And so this is the digital watch. And what happened is the digital watch sold like hotcakes and then it flattened out. And how did they get it to sell again? They dropped the price. And then what happens to the digital watch? Everybody has one. And they didn't pay enough time to think about fashion and things like that that can invigorate it. If we look at the home VCR, it reduced. And the reason why is once everybody had a VCR, how often do you want to switch these things? And so they had to put in more features and bring the price down to try to get this to go up again. And then the answering machine, it flattened out because how many answering machines do you actually need? And so they got it to grow again by dropping down the price, but then they flattened out again. Keys to crossing. What kind of value are you providing? How risky do people look at you? Are there barriers to entry? How sensitive are they to price? How will people know about you? Can you pivot into new uses? Can complements or supplements add value? Again, there's status quo that you're trying to break. And so how do you cross? I think we've already talked about these, but these are the techniques that people use to cross the chasm. Which one will you want to use? So your landscape, the cost and infrastructure when you enter. Customer acquisition is about digital or physical. Diffusion. P is what's the probability they'll try it. Q is what's the probability that if somebody else is using it, I'll use it. And the best market for P's and Q's are teenagers. Meaning if somebody thinks something's cool, they'll get into it. What are your series of actions? And who is your customer? Now, when is something a strategy and when is something a plan? And yes, this can get kind of long, but what it comes down to is a plan has no metrics. A plan doesn't have a clear objective. And Admiral Yu, and this is considered to be one of the greatest naval victories in Korean history, he had to fight the Japanese Navy. He was outnumbered 133 to 13. But the Japanese boats were smaller than his, and so what he did is he blocked the channel because he was trying to prevent them from reaching Seoul. He found a place where the tides and everything went in one direction, but there was something weird about it, meaning at one point in the day, it would change direction. So using one ship, he blocked the way. The water was very rough here, so these guys are bouncing up and down. It's very hard to fire cannons when your ships are bouncing up and down. Here, the water's smooth, and all of a sudden they start opening up. And what happens is these large, heavy ships have battering rams. And so when it changed direction, these guys had a hard time turning around. And literally, the Korean Navy overran the Japanese Navy. Things that companies say is their strategy, like we'll map out the tech space and put technologies in every sector. That's not a strategy. The other key to a strategy is there has to be a competitive advantage. What is it about this strategy where you can employ something that can be an advantage? What is your objective? What's the background? What plan? And how are you going to execute? It's about using a competitive advantage. Understand the landscape, identify who you're going up against, identify what markets you're going to, and your objectives have to be smart. What's the opportunity? What targets do I want? And how do I keep and grow customers? That's what my marketing strategy revolves around, and I have objectives. Who are my customers? Why am I targeting them? Where can I find them? What will I do with them? And how am I going to do it? But your customers, again, change with sales. Generically, what is the vision and mission for your company? Why do you exist? That drives what your goals and objectives are, what information I need, how you plan, and how you're going to execute. All three have to mesh together. You have to find an answer and confirm it that it's right. And so the questions you're asking, these are the ones for market. These are for product. And these are the ones for your company. And so you need to figure out what the answer to these questions are. You want to become immune to price. If you get into arguments about price, you're not going to make it because the larger competitor has more cash. In terms of product, you want to differentiate. When they talk about you and something else, it should be an apples to oranges comparison. And finally, what kind of intimacy do you have with the company, with your customers? Are you fresh? Are you exciting? And so this is what strategy all revolves around. But what it really comes down to is what is your competitive advantage? So a lot of people believe marketing is about the moves you make against your competitors. And you can compete on a lot of different dimensions, but you're also going up against competitors who understand the customer. Now, making those virtual maps and all helps you see how to position yourselves. Your incumbents have advantages because they've been successful, but at the same time, they tend to get lazy and trapped in their own ways. You have agility. That's what you need to take advantage of. And you need to be aware how you're going to cross that chasm because you want continuous growth.